So the other day I was watching The Dark Knight Returns on Toonami, and that was a damn good movie, I gotta say. But after finishing it, it suddenly hit me. There are a ton of DC animated films. Warner Brothers have been making these films since the mid-90s and still going strong. Nearly 27 years of animated movies, and I've always enjoyed them, but never sat down and watched them all. And that's a shame because I've always been a huge fan of DC. While Marvel dominates the silver screen, DC's works are wrong! Yeah, they're not that great. But they excel tremendously in their animated film department, to a degree. Marvel's animated films are relatively small, only 8 films, and some of them don't even reach their true potential, other than the Hulk vs. short film. I decided to look more in depth into the success of DC, and during my research, I found out that DC has 52 films. The sheer size of the animated lineup has resulted in a huge collection of diverse films, more so than Marvel's animated films, including their main movies. And I decided to watch and review them all. Hi everyone, Dino here, and today folks, I'm gonna review every single DC animated movie. Cue my obligatory AMV intro. Let's start things right with a classic film that will go down in animation history, Batman, Mask of the Phantasm. Based off the animated series that was airing at the time, Warner Brothers decided to air this film in theaters. It unfortunately flopped, but has garnered respect over the years because it's such a great film. What's the plot? A masked figure is going around killing all these mafia members, and Batman must solve the mystery behind these murders. On the surface, it sounds like a basic plot for the series, but that's not why this movie is as admired as it is. If you ask me, this isn't just another Batman movie, but a tragic love story with a murder mystery attached to it. The real film doesn't start until we get to Bruce's flashback with Andrea, where we see a young Bruce talking to his dead parents and as a coping mechanism. But in the same cemetery, he meets Andrea, a young and beautiful woman who she too has a dead mom. How romantic! And from there, spark a relationship with each other, and it's just so sweet. They actually seem like a nice and happy couple. They go on a date to Gotham's World Fair, which is a perfect representation of their relationship and their future, and I'll explain why in a bit. And for the first time in Bruce's miserable life, he has found true happiness. And that right there is the tragedy of Bruce Wayne. Throughout the flashback, he's seen fighting crime as a way to atone for his sin, but in the second fight, Bruce hesitated because Andrea was shocked at the type of path Bruce was going down. A path of violence and destruction, and Bruce knew that as well. So Bruce decided not to take the path and instead proposed to her. Things are looking up, but fate is a cruel bitch. Literally the next day, Andrea abandons him for unknown reasons and Bruce is destroyed. Andrea was the only thing that was keeping Bruce sane, and without her, he fell down the abyss, and from that darkness rose a being of vengeance, a creature of the night. Out from the pit came Batman. But that's not the end of this film. It also has a mystery to it. Who is this Phantom killing all these mafia members? Well, spoilers and spoilers to all these films, and honestly, this movie's 27 years old. Should have seen it by now, but whatever. I'm not your dad. Andrea's back in town after a decade of absence, and she's mad at Bruce cause reasons, and starts dating this smug politician, all while these old mafia guys who are connected are killed off one after another by this Phantom, which by the way looks very menacing, reminding me of the Grim Reaper and their daunting voice.
Salvalestra, your angel of death awaits.
Good stuff. I like this guy. All these murders escalate to the point that the head honcho of the old group gets desperate enough to hire the king of society himself, the Joker.
Don't touch me, old man. I don't know where you've been.
With Joker on the case, the chase is on to find out who the Phantom is and stop him. But Batman has already figured out who it is, and it's Andrea. She was his last beacon of hope, and that hope has fallen. It's a tragedy between lovers. Their hopeful future has rotted away, and all that's left is madness. But even from the darkness, there is still hope. It's such a compelling film, and I haven't even gone into the animation, which is A+ in my books. It's the animated series style, and you can't go wrong with it. I describe the style as simplistically detailed, in which it's simple shapes, yet you add a ton of detail onto it, and it's smooth as silk. With this amalgamation of a tragic love story with a glimmer of hope, superb animation that still holds up to this day, great performances from both Mark and Kevin, we get one of the greatest animated films that will go down in not just animation, but film history as well, and it is glorious. I definitely recommend this film. I'd go as far as to say you must watch this film before you die. It's a damn good movie. With that said, let's get on to the second film on our list, Batman, Subzero. This film, if you ask me, is a bit of a downgrade from our previous installation. Why? Well, let's start with the story. Mr. Freeze needs to find a cure for his wife, and he finds that Barbara Gordon has the right blood that'll cure his wife, so he kidnaps her and Batman and Robin must save the day. That's it. I mean, do we have more character depth? Not really. Batman fights crime, Bruce is smart and suave, Robin exists.
Well, excuse me, princess.
Barbara is honestly more of a tool for the plot, which is a shame because she's introduced here as Batgirl. There was so much potential for her in this story. That's why I find it disheartening for her to be reduced down to this. What about Mr. Freeze? Does he grow as a character? Kinda. Not really. He does get this Eskimo kit, and I always find it cheesy whenever Freeze has the ability to command polar bears. The kid's alright. He's an orphan, and we got this scene.
No, and I'm not just a kid. I'm 12.
12, huh? And very handsome.
You're kind of cute too, lady.
You sure you're just 12?
13 next summer.
And that's it. Mr. Freeze is more of an asshole, and he doesn't really change until the very end. And there's this guy. Yeah, I know I'm coming off as extremely negative. How's the animation then? I'd say it's alright. The animation here is a transitioning period between the animated series and the New Adventures of Batman that was airing at the time. They were moving away from the simplistically detailed to Bruce Timm's simpler style, and some scenes do highlight the more detailed of the animated series, which is always good in my books. But I gotta be honest, I really don't like how the male character's eyes are just dots and not pupils. It just doesn't seem right. The females were also starting to look more feminine, which is classic Bruce Timm style, and they added some CGI to this and it doesn't look good. Like I said from the beginning, this movie is a giant downgrade because it's not as captivating as the last one. The story is simple, the characters are simple, the animation is pretty dang good, but there's still no depth to the movie. It just feels like an extended episode of the New Adventures of Batman that was airing at the time. No, I'm not saying the movie is bad, far from it. I thought it was alright, but that right there is the biggest crime, to be mediocre. At least when you're bad, you're still remembered, but when you're mediocre, you're forgotten easily. If they maybe involved Batgirl more to the story, it could have been saved, but what we got is pretty good if you ask me. Give it a watch. It's a decent film. Coming up next is a new millennium, and with this new age came a new Batman. Up next is Batman, Return of the Joker. This movie, if you ask me, is pretty darn good. This movie starts off with a huge bang. These clowns are trying to steal some weird gizmo, but Terry doesn't let them. This is obviously based off Batman Beyond that was airing at the time. Bruce is now a Boomer Supreme, and he needs someone younger to take up the Bat mantle. Enter Terry McGinnis. Terry is obviously more youthful, so he's gonna make more witty remarks, which I think is good, showcasing the generational difference between Bruce and Terry's Batman. Bruce was always a no-nonsense militant way of fighting crime, while Terry makes it seem nonchalant. The art style is really bland and generic, but this movie makes up for it by making the animation as smooth as possible and by adding shading to the characters and settings to make it more dimensional. The colors pop out more considering they're using digital animation, and I like that a lot. The character designs are the classic Bruce Timm, men looking like rectangles while the women look extremely feminine and young. Voice work is great as always. Kevin reprises his role as Bruce Wayne and he sounds perfect, as well as Mark being the Joker, the living embodiment of insanity, and that laugh never gets old. Music to my ears. With that said, what's the story? Well, Joker's back in town after being killed all those years ago, and he's up to something as usual. And Bruce and Terry must put an end to his madness. Pretty straightforward, but there's a scene in here that if you ask me will go down in animation history. Which scene you may ask? Well, it was when Barbara explained what happened all those years ago. Hold on to your butts, folks. This is where things get dark. Real dark. Tim gets kidnapped by Joker and Harley, and Batman and Batgirl are trying to find him. They're then both invited to the asylum, where they see Joker's most twisted act ever. He tortured him, broke him, and molded him into this abomination. It showed just how far Joker will go to destroy Batman, and it nearly succeeded. As stated previously, no matter how dark things get, there's always hope, but even that hope was tainted. Again, complexity and pushing the boundary is why this scene will go down in animation history. Tim retired and decided to become a communication engineer and has a wife and kid. Good for him. Tim wanted to patch things up with Bruce, but Bruce never forgave himself for his irresponsibility. But with Joker's return, Tim's PTSD kicks into overdrive. But wait a minute, Joker was killed. How the heck is he back? Well, this is where things kind of fall apart. Joker's back with a new crew. This chubby guy, Random Harry, these two e-girls who obviously have an OnlyFans, Hyena Man, and the muscle. Oh, he's gone. Joker has these weirdos run around and get these military-grade laser parts for something. But how does Joker know all these components combined can control a big-ass laser? Well, he's controlling Tim. But how? Well, like this.
Utilizing cutting-edge genetics technology, which I had pinched here and there, I encoded my DNA on a microchip and set it into Bird Boy's bird brain.
This is some pseudoscience shit. Well, long story short, Terry defeats Joker and Tim is saved. Bruce then comes by to make amends with Tim and everyone is happy. So overall, a pretty good film with a historically fantastic scene. With a weak twist, but wraps up everything nicely. I like this film, and it's worth your time. Next in line is Batman, Mystery of the Batwoman. The best way to describe this movie is wonky. Why? Well, let's start with the story. A new Batwoman is in town messing up Penguin's arms deal, and Batman must get to the bottom on who this Bat female is. What is it, Scooby-Doo now? Again, the story here isn't that big or dramatic, and if you keep watching, you'll figure out who she is, and I'll get to that later, but for now, let's talk about the animation. The art style here is again Bruce Timm's simplicity, but here it's so basic. It's so bland. Look at this Bruce and look at that Bruce. So much detail is gone. It's oversimplification to the extreme. With Return of the Joker, they might have had a simpler art style, but they compensated that simplicity with darker shading and fluid animation. But here, the shading is a lot lighter, and the animation is wonky. Look at that running animation. Aesthetically, it's the weakest of the film so far in my opinion. You remember how I keep mentioning Tim's male drawings all looking like giant rectangles and all the women are extremely feminine? Well, here, it's all ramped up. Look at these guys, looking like Roblox rejects. Bane looks terrible, god. And of course, all the women look sexy and have the same slender body. Senran and Kagura logic. It's so dumb, but I can't hate it. It's funny. Nice ass shot. Also, why does Batgirl want the bat dick?
Spring break will be coming up soon, and I'll be back in Gotham for 2 whole weeks. Won't that be nice?
I'm rambling now. I apologize. Let's get to the characters. We have Batman once again. He's the same and so is his voice, so nothing much to say. We have Robin. He exists and does nothing. Yeah. We have Roxanne, a clumsy girl who's actually a smart cookie and is working for Bruce. Good for her. Sonia is the detective on the Batwoman case, and she's working with Peter Griffin here. Obviously, she's the smart one of the group, and I like her for that. We then have the bad girl of the group, Duquesne, daughter of the crime lord, voiced by Kevin Michael Richardson. She's the carefree, rebellious rich girl of the trio and is hitting on Bruce because she can, so good for her. We then have Penguin, and he's super fat here, Jesus, but he's also the catalyst of the whole story. The mystery is pretty easy to solve, and originally I thought Batwoman was Kathy, but then it turns out it wasn't her, but it was because there are 3 women playing Batwoman, so that's kind of clever. To go back to Penguin, he's the main reason 3 women became Batwoman. Because Sonia's family business was destroyed by the Penguin, Roxanne's BF was framed by him, and he's now in jail, and Kathy doesn't like the fact that her father is a crime lord, and that her mother was innocently shot just because she was close to him. So they all don't like Penguin and try to stop his weapon sales. Batman gets involved, and that's it. Oh, and the end credits is so cheesy. It's spectacular. It's strange it works, but if you ask me, this film wasn't the best. Not the worst, but it's very mediocre. It looks pretty bad. If you want to see some fan service, go for it, but I'd skip it. Not the best film they've made. Coming up next, we have The Batman vs. Dracula. This one is pretty darn good if you ask me. Like the last few films that were following the series that was airing at the time, this one follows the Batman that aired in Kids WB. The art style here is more anime-ish, and I believe why it was like this was because a lot of Western cartoons were emulating the anime style back in the early 2000s due to how anime was exploding onto the West, and here it works. The villains are designed more exaggerated than usual, which I enjoy. Penguin's got a big ass hat on and a super sharp nose to him, and Tom Kenny's performance is outstanding as usual. He really brings out the greedy bastard in Penguin.
Mighty gracious of the Batman to take all the blame for you, sucker! I am a Cobblepot, and Cobblepots do not serve
Joker here is more animalistic and can actually fight back against the Batman. Here, he's voiced by Kevin Michael Richardson, you know, the guy you call if you want a character to have a deep voice. And he really accentuates Joker's madness.
Goodbye, Arkham. Hello, Gotham.
Batman here isn't voiced by Kevin, but by Reno Romano, aka...
Little rough, don't you think?
His voice work is pretty good. He makes Bruce sound young, which makes sense since this Bruce looks like he's in his mid-20s. As for his design, other than the weird side chip on his face, it's alright. But how about Batman? How is he? I like the simplicity of the design, but it's also more stylized with the longer cape and coat-like wrap. One issue I don't like are his short ears. They have to be long to make him look more menacing. But with all that said, what's the story? Well, basically, Joker and Penguin escaped Arkham for the 10,000th time, but Penguin overhears about a fortune in a graveyard and he tries to find it, but instead accidentally resurrects Dracula. Dracula comes to life and wants to wreak havoc onto Gotham. It's so absurd, it works. Because of the anime-ish style, Dracula looks extremely intimidating, making him into this pillar of darkness and evil. And he attends Bruce Wayne's ball party to mock and simp for Vicky Vale. Bruce figures out that Alucard is actually Dracula spelled backwards, and chases on to defeat him and his vampire army. He even turned Joker into a vampire. Batman then tries to cure the vampire virus and he uses Joker as a test subject. Joker suffering from withdrawal.
Thirsty. Burning up inside. I can't take it anymore.
Batman solves it within a week's time and proceeds to fight Dracula, and it's really action-packed. The animation here is top-notch. It looks so refined and clean, and it's pretty bright. Also love the red and blue contrast between Batman and Dracula. I love when stories do that contrast color rivalry. Very good, and overall, this film is a great entertaining watch, and I'd highly recommend it. You're not going to get a deep philosophical case study, but you get a great film altogether. Coming up next is Teen Titans: Trouble in Tokyo. Finally, something that's not Batman. Basically, the series finale of the OG Teen Titans. So the classic characters are here one last time for their final hurrah. Robin is the no-nonsense leader of the group, Starfire is the cute alien who most likely has an OnlyFans, Cyborg is the giant funny man of the group, Beast Boy is the hippie, and Raven inspired an entire generation of skinny neurotic white kids who will go head over heels over some random girl who wears all black clothing and makeup. You know, the usual. The story starts off with a bang. A generic villain is terrorizing their town, and they have to put a stop to this weirdo. Robin interrogates the villain, and he speaks in Japanese, so it translates his language and tells him that Broshogun sent him, and then he disappears. So they decide to go to Japan, and a cute little montage commences. And they finally arrive in Japan. It has a ton of bright lights, and Beast Boy wants to go to the manga factory, but they all tell him no. Godzilla then shows up, and Koichi and his police put a stop to him. He then gives them a tour of Tokyo and his police force and tells Robin that Broshogun doesn't exist. We then branch off to these mini stories that each Titan has. Cyborg eats Billy's restaurant out of business, Beast Boy tries to activate his inner weeb, but then he encounters a karaoke and is loved by all these fangirls. Raven eats gum, and Starfire and Robin go on a date.
Must we always be heroes? Are we capable of nothing else? Can we not, for a few moments, be something more?
This scene right here is pretty dramatic, but in a good way. It questions if they have enough time to be regular people, and it's a great question to ask. This film really focuses on Robin and Starfire's relationship, since that was always the fans' favorite pairing. But then Robin is sent to prison due to a murder, and now the Titan must prove his innocence. But then Robin escapes and tries to find out who really is Broshogun. The story is really engaging. So many twists and mini stories about the film feel right at home in the Titans League. It's nice, but my main issue with this film are the action scenes. There's rarely any physical contact or barely any choreography. Instead, it's white flashes when they punch, dramatic stills, or simulated actions or projectiles being thrown around. Everything up to this point, the action felt real because they physically punched each other or there was weight behind them. This kind of feels loose if you ask me, but I think it's entertaining still. The Titans find out that Broshogun is being used by Koichi to create his police force and the criminals so he can make himself the best hero in Tokyo, and then transforms into a giant monster, but then Robin defeats the monster and kisses Starfire. A satisfying ending to an overall pretty good movie. A perfect way to wrap up the series, and I definitely say it's worth your time. And this was the dawn of the DC animated movies. What we witnessed so far was a spectacular opening with Mask of the Phantasm charging the head, but the films afterwards kinda wavered. Not to say that the rest of them were all bad, but they either fallen entertainingly good to forgettable. But it's just that the first film was just so grand that it shadowed its predecessors. This is only the beginning of the DC animated films. There are so many others that I simply can't fit all of them into such a short video. So stay tuned for the rest of the mega review of all 52 DC animated movies. Up next will be the renaissance of the DCAU. With all that said, this has been Dino, and have a wonderful day, folks. Cue the credits.
Be gone, son!